Observer Talmec adjusted the viewing screen in his quarters aboard the Silent Watcher. The ship hung in orbit above the human colony world, invisible to the primitive sensors below. For 40 years, he had studied military conflicts across the galaxy. He had watched the Korthax raiders crush entire civilizations. He had documented the fall of the Huren Empire. He had seen war in all its forms. This assignment should have been simple. The humans were newcomers to space travel. Their ships were slow and clumsy. Their weapons used chemical propellants instead of plasma. They had no shields worth mentioning. By every measure the Confederacy used, they were barely ready to leave their home world. Yet here they were, fighting the Korthax raiders over a mining colony. Talmec pulled up the mission brief on his datapad. The Confederacy Council wanted a full tactical assessment before offering humanity membership in the galactic community. Standard procedure. Every species had to prove they could defend themselves and contribute to collective security. He studied the files on human biology. They were fragile creatures. Their bones broke easily. They could survive in only a narrow range of temperatures. They needed constant food and water. They lived for barely a century. Sometimes less. Most troubling, they had only recently stopped fighting wars against each other. The report noted that humans had divided themselves into groups called nations, and these nations had spent thousands of years killing each other. Talmec found this disturbing, but not unusual. Many primitive species went through such phases before achieving unity. He zoomed in on the human base below. It was designated Forward Operating Base Stalwart, a cluster of prefabricated buildings surrounded by a basic defensive wall. Approximately 300 human soldiers were stationed there, part of something called the 7th Marine Expeditionary Force. The base commander was Colonel Day-Ho. Talmec examined his file with interest. The human had fought in 17 major engagements, all against other humans, in various conflicts on their home world. He had survived injuries that would have killed most species. The file listed several medals, though Talmec did not understand their significance. More interesting was the command structure. Unlike Vrelian forces, which used efficient designation codes, humans gave each soldier an individual name. They organized themselves into small units with personal bonds rather than optimal efficiency groups. Talmec made a note to investigate whether this primitive social structure created tactical weaknesses. He selected a unit to observe closely. Sergeant Ji Woo commanded a squad of 5 soldiers. The file showed she had been in the military for 8 years, an incredibly short time by galactic standards. Most Vrelian officers trained for 20 years before seeing combat. Her squad members were equally inexperienced. Corporal Hyun-sik served as their medic. He was only 24 years old. Private Young-mi handled communications, and was even younger, at 22. Private Tae-young operated their heavy weapons, a chemical propellant machine gun that seemed absurdly primitive. Private Bo-ra worked as their scout. Despite being the smallest member of the team, Talmec deployed his observation drones. The microscopic devices would follow the squad and record everything. He settled back in his chair, expecting a routine documentation of defensive tactics. The attack came without warning. Talmec's screens flashed red as his sensors detected incoming Korthax dropships, 12 vessels, carrying at least 200 raiders. The Korthax were known for their brutality and their effectiveness. They had terrorized this sector for decades. Even Confederacy forces treated them with caution. The human base should have been doomed. Talmec watched as alarms blared across the compound. Human soldiers poured out of their barracks, moving to defensive positions with surprising speed. He focused his drones on Sergeant Ji Woo's squad. She was shouting orders, her voice calm despite the chaos. Hyun-sik, set up the aid station in Building 3. Young-mi, I need communications with Colonel Day-ho now. Tae-yang, take your gun to the north wall. Bo-ra, get me eyes on their landing zone. The squad moved without hesitation. No debate. The Korthax ships landed 200 meters from the base perimeter. Talmec had seen this tactic before. The raiders would establish a firebase, then methodically reduce the human defenses with superior firepower. Standard doctrine called for the humans to hunker down, call for reinforcements, and wait for relief. The first Korthax warriors emerged from their ships. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor plates. Their plasma rifles could punch through standard military barriers. They began their advance with confident precision. Then, something happened that made Talmec lean forward in his chair. The humans attacked. Sergeant Jiwoo led her squad out through a side gate, moving directly toward the Korthax position. Not to establish a defensive line, not to delay them. They were charging straight at an enemy force that outnumbered them 10 to 1. What are they doing? Talmec whispered to his empty quarters. Young Mi ran alongside her sergeant, carrying her communications equipment. Talmec watched in disbelief as plasma bolts struck the ground around her. She did not seek cover. She dropped to one knee in the open and began calling out coordinates for artillery support. Yun-Sik was supposed to be at the aid station. Instead, he ran forward with the assault team, his medical bag bouncing on his back. When one of the other human soldiers fell, Hyun-Sik sprinted through a crossfire zone to reach him. Tae-Yang set up his machine gun on a small rise that offered no protection whatsoever. He began firing in controlled bursts, and Talmec's audio sensors picked up something strange. The human was singing, actually singing while enemy fire poured around him. Bo-Ra had somehow circled around the entire Korthax position. Talmec lost track of her for several minutes, then spotted her behind enemy lines, alone, marking targets for the human artillery. The human artillery began firing. Crude, explosive shells. Nothing like the precision weapons the Confederacy used. But they fell exactly where Young-Mi directed them, tearing into the Korthax formation. Colonel Dae-Ho appeared on Talmec's screen, leading 2 more squads out of the base. The commander was not directing the battle from safety. He was in front of his troops, weapon in hand, charging toward the enemy. The Korthax, who had been advancing with confidence, suddenly found themselves in a desperate fight. They tried to regroup, but the humans gave them no time. Sergeant Jiwoo's squad hit their flank, while Colonel Dae-Ho's force struck from the front. Talmec watched the Korthax break. They retreated to their ships in disorder, something he had never seen them do. The humans did not simply let them go. They pursued, firing at the landing craft as they lifted off. The entire battle lasted 18 minutes. Talmec sat in stunned silence, reviewing the footage. By every tactical analysis model he knew, the humans should have lost. They had been outnumbered, outgunned, and technologically inferior. Their tactics violated every principle of modern warfare. Yet they had won. He began writing his preliminary report, his manipulators trembling slightly as he typed. After 40 years of military observation, he found himself using a phrase he never expected to write. Recommend immediate threat level reassessment. Human combat behavior does not conform to any known tactical doctrine. Further observation required. Talmec looked at his screens, watching the humans tend their wounded and repair their defenses. Sergeant Jiwoo was helping Hyun-Sik carry an injured soldier. Young-Mi was already checking her equipment for the next fight. Tae-Yang was reloading his primitive weapon and laughing about something. They looked so fragile, so primitive, so weak. So why did Talmec suddenly feel afraid? 3 days had passed since the first attack. Talmec had not slept well during that time. His species needed only 4 hours of rest per cycle, but his mind kept replaying the battle footage. He had watched it 17 times, analyzing every moment, trying to understand what he had witnessed. The preliminary report he sent to Confederacy Command had received a dismissive response. Observer Talmec, your assessment appears emotionally influenced. Humans are Category 3 species at best. Continue observation and provide objective analysis. Objective analysis. Talmec had spent 4 decades providing objective analysis. He knew what he had seen. His sensors detected movement in the human base below. Sergeant Jiwoo's squad was preparing for a patrol. Talmec directed his drones to follow them. Perhaps extended observation would either confirm or dismiss his concerns. The squad moved out through the main gate at dawn. Their mission? according to intercepted communications, was to check several outlying sensor stations. A routine patrol. Nothing dangerous expected. Talmec noticed how they moved. Bo-Ra walked point, 20 meters ahead of the others. Her eyes constantly scanned the terrain. Taeyang brought up the rear, his heavy weapon ready despite the weight. Young Mi stayed in the center, monitoring communications. Hyun-Sik walked near Sergeant Ji-woo, his medical equipment carefully organized. They moved through broken terrain, around rock formations and dried stream beds. The planet's twin suns climbed higher, and the temperature rose. Talmec checked his readings. 43 degrees. Hot enough to be uncomfortable for humans, though not dangerous yet. 2 hours into the patrol, Bo-Ra raised her fist. The entire squad stopped instantly. She pointed to the ground, then made several hand signals. Talmec's translation software interpreted them. Tracks, fresh, Korthax. Sergeant Ji-woo moved forward to examine the tracks herself. She studied them for nearly a minute, then spoke quietly into her radio. We have Korthax tracks, heading west toward Sensor Station 3. Looks like a scouting party. Maybe 6 individuals. Colonel Daeho's voice crackled back. Copy that. Return to base. We will send a full platoon to investigate. The logical response. The safe response. 6 Korthax warriors were more than a match for 5 humans. Negative, sir, Sergeant Ji-woo replied. They are heading toward the civilian mining camp at Ridge 7. If we wait for the platoon, those miners will be dead before help arrives. We are moving to intercept. There was a pause. Then Colonel Daeho spoke again. Understood. You have authorization. Reinforcements will follow your position. Do not engage unless necessary to protect civilians. Yes, sir. Talmec felt that strange fear again. They were going after 6 Korthax warriors. 5 humans against 6 Korthax. He had watched Korthax warriors tear through armored vehicles. He had seen them rip steel doors off their hinges. The squad picked up their pace, moving at a run now. Bo-Ra stayed ahead, following the tracks. They covered 3 kilometers in 20 minutes, an impressive pace given the terrain and heat. The mining camp appeared ahead, a cluster of prefabricated shelters and excavation equipment. Talmec counted 12 civilian humans working there, unaware of the danger approaching. Bo-Ra signaled again. The Korthax were close. Sergeant Ji-woo split her squad with quick hand signals. Bo-Ra circled left. Taeyang went right to find a firing position. Hyun-Sik and Young Mi stayed with the sergeant. They crept forward, using the mining equipment for cover. Talmec spotted the Korthax first. 6 warriors, just as predicted, moving toward the mining camp from the west. They carried plasma rifles and wore combat armor. Against 12 unarmed miners, it would be a massacre. The logical tactic would be to call in artillery, then evacuate the civilians during the confusion. The humans had time for that. The Korthax were still 200 meters away. Instead, Sergeant Ji-woo stood up and opened fire. Her weapon made a sharp cracking sound. Chemical propellants driving metal projectiles. Primitive. Loud. Inefficient. 1 Korthax warrior stumbled. His armor damaged. The other 5 turned toward her, their plasma rifles coming up. That was when Taeyang opened fire from their flank. His machine gun roared. A sustained burst that caught 2 Korthax in the open. Bo-Ra fired from the other side, her shots precise and measured. The Korthax, suddenly caught in a crossfire, did what any trained soldier would do. They sought cover and began to return fire. Their plasma bolts turned the mining equipment into molten slag, but they were no longer advancing on the civilians. Young Mi, Sergeant Ji-woo shouted. Get those miners to cover now. The young private ran into the open, directly toward the mining camp. Plasma bolts seared the air around her. One shot passed so close to her head that Talmec's sensors detected burning hair. She did not slow down. Young Mi reached the first miner, grabbed him, and physically pulled him toward shelter. Move, all of you, Move. Into the equipment shed. The miners, finally understanding the danger, ran for cover. Youngmi helped an older human who was moving too slowly, supporting him as they ran. A plasma bolt struck the ground at their feet. Youngmi stumbled, but kept moving, kept helping the old man. Hyun-sik ran to join her, helping gather the civilians. Talmek watched in disbelief as the medic exposed himself to enemy fire, again and again, making sure every civilian reached safety. Meanwhile, Sergeant Ji-woo advanced. Not away from the enemy. Toward them, she moved from cover to cover, firing in short bursts. Each time the Korthax tried to reposition, Taeyang's machine gun forced them down. Each time they focused on Taeyang, Bora hit them from another angle. One Korthax warrior charged at Sergeant Ji-woo's position. He was massive, his armor scarred from countless battles. His plasma rifle glowed as he fired continuously. The sergeant's cover began to melt. She rolled out from behind it, coming up on one knee. Her weapon clicked empty. The Korthax roared and charged, closing the distance in seconds. Sergeant Ji-woo dropped her rifle and drew a knife. A knife. Against a 3-meter-tall armored warrior, the Korthax swung his rifle like a club. She ducked under it, moving inside his reach. Her knife found a gap in his armor at the joint, where his arm met his torso. She drove it in deep, twisted, and ripped it free. The warrior staggered. She kicked his knee, a joint humans shared with Korthax. It buckled. As he fell, she grabbed his own rifle and shot him with it. Then she picked up her empty rifle, reloaded it, and kept advancing. The remaining Korthax began to retreat. Talmek checked his tactical display. Reinforcements were still 5 minutes away. The Korthax could have broken contact, escaped to fight another day. The humans did not let them. Bora anticipated their retreat route and was already there, her weapon ready. Taeyang shifted position, cutting off another escape path. The Korthax found themselves trapped, surrounded by 5 humans who should not have been able to threaten them at all. The battle ended quickly after that. When the reinforcements arrived, they found Sergeant Ji-woo's squad tending to wounded civilians. Hyun-sik was treating a miner who had been hit by debris. Youngmi was checking her communications equipment, which had been damaged by a plasma bolt. Taeyang sat beside his machine gun, methodically cleaning it. Bora was already scouting the perimeter, making sure no more threats approached. All 5 humans were injured in some way. Burns, cuts, and bruises covered them. None had mentioned it. None had stopped working. Colonel Daeho arrived with the reinforcements. He surveyed the scene. The dead Korthax, the saved civilians, his exhausted squad. He walked up to Sergeant Ji-woo and spoke quietly. "Good work. Thank you, sir. Just doing our job. Just doing their job." Talmek replayed those words in his mind. That evening, he wrote another report. This one was longer, more detailed, filled with tactical analysis and combat footage. He concluded with a statement that he knew would be ignored. Human military doctrine is fundamentally different from all known combat systems. They do not fight to minimize casualties. They do not fight to achieve optimal outcomes. They fight to win, regardless of cost to themselves. This makes accurate threat assessment impossible using standard models. He sent the report and sat back in his chair. On his screens, Sergeant Ji-woo's squad was sharing a meal in their barracks. They were laughing about something. Youngmi was showing the others her damaged radio. Taeyang was singing. Again. They had just fought 6 Korthax warriors and won. They had been injured, had nearly died, had saved 12 civilians who would otherwise be dead, and they were laughing. Talmek did not understand humans at all. 3 weeks passed. Talmek had sent 4 more reports to Confederacy Command. Each one was acknowledged, and essentially ignored. The Council had decided humans were Category 3, and no amount of field observation seemed likely to change their minds. Talmek no longer cared about the Council's opinion. He continued observing because he needed to understand. The question that haunted him was simple. How were the humans so effective despite being so primitive? He had expanded his observation network. Now he monitored not just Sergeant Ji Woo's squad, but several other human units as well. The pattern remained consistent. Humans took risks no sane soldier would take. They refused to abandon positions that should be abandoned. They fought when they should retreat. And they kept winning. A new human had arrived at Forward Operating Base Stalwart. Captain Minseo, a special operations officer. Her file was heavily classified, but Talmec had managed to access parts of it. She had conducted operations behind enemy lines on 7 different worlds. Her survival rate was listed as improbable. Captain Minseo moved differently than the other humans. She was perfectly calm at all times, her voice never rising above a conversational tone. This disturbed Talmec more than the screaming charges of regular soldiers. At least those seemed like emotional responses. Minseo's calmness suggested something else entirely. Today, the humans were conducting a joint training exercise with a Vrelian peacekeeping unit that had recently arrived in the system. Talmec watched with interest. Perhaps seeing humans and Vrelians work together would provide useful comparative data. The exercise was simple. A simulated hostage rescue. The Vrelian commander, group leader Felnar, explained the scenario carefully. Hostiles held a building. Hostages were on the 2nd floor. The goal was to neutralize the hostiles with minimal casualties on both sides. The Vrelian team went first. They approached methodically, using proper cover and movement techniques. They deployed sensor drones to map the building interior. They established a perimeter and set up shield generators. After 14 minutes of preparation, they executed a coordinated entry through multiple access points. Total time from start to finish: 18 minutes. Hostage casualties in the simulation: 2. A respectable performance by any standard measure. Then came the humans. Sergeant Ji Woo's squad approached the same building. They studied it for perhaps 30 seconds. Then Young Mi kicked in the front door and threw in 2 grenades. The squad entered while the explosions were still echoing. Total time from start to finish: 90 seconds. Hostage casualties in the simulation: 0. Group leader Felnar protested. "You used explosives. You risked the hostages." "But we didn't hit them," Sergeant Ji Woo replied calmly. And in 90 seconds, the enemy had no time to execute anyone. The Vrelian officer began explaining proper procedures, but an alarm interrupted him. A real alarm. Talmec's sensors detected an emergency signal from a nearby colony. The base command center erupted with activity. Talmec listened to the communications. A Korthax battle fleet had appeared in orbit around Colony 7, a civilian settlement 3 light hours away, 8 warships, thousands of raiders. The colony's small defense force was already overwhelmed. Group leader Felnar immediately began calculating response times. "We can have a relief force assembled in 6 hours. I will request authorization from Confederacy Command. 2. How long until everyone in that colony is dead?" Captain Minseo interrupted. The Vrelian officer looked uncomfortable. "Based on typical Korthax tactics, the civilian population will be eliminated in approximately 4 hours. Then we leave in 10 minutes. Talmec thought he had misheard. 10 minutes? To mount a military operation? Against a battle fleet? Captain Minseo ignored him. She turned to Colonel Deho. "Sir, I need 2 transports, everyone you can spare, and all the heavy weapons we can load in the next 10 minutes. The colonel did not hesitate. "You have it. Who is going?" "My team and anyone who volunteers." Sergeant Ji Woo stepped forward immediately. "My squad volunteers." "You just returned from a month-long deployment," Colonel Deho said. "Yes, sir. We volunteer." One by one, every human in the room stepped forward. Every single one. Group leader Felnar was stunned. "This is madness. You cannot fight a battle fleet with 2 transports. You need proper planning, proper equipment, proper timing is what we need," Captain Mincio said. And we are running out of it. 8 minutes later, 2 human transports lifted off. Talmec had redirected his observation drones to follow them, his scientific detachment completely abandoned. He had to see how this ended. The transports were designed to carry cargo, not fight warships. They had no weapons, minimal armor, and slow engines. Inside, 63 humans checked their equipment in silence. The flight to Colony 7 took 3 hours. During that time, Talmec watched Captain Mincio brief her teams. The plan was insane. They would bypass the orbital battle and drop directly onto the colony surface. They would insert behind Korthak's lines and fight their way to the civilians. What about extraction? Someone asked. We hold until the Vrelian relief force arrives. 3 hours. Maybe 4. 2. 3 hours. 63 humans against thousands of Korthak's raiders. Talmec calculated their survival probability at less than 2%. They knew it too. He could see it in their faces. They understood the odds perfectly. None of them complained. None of them asked to be left behind. The insertion went wrong immediately. Korthak's warships detected the transports and opened fire. The lead transport took a direct hit to its engines. The pilot fought the controls, trying to guide the crippled ship down. They crashed 50 kilometers from the colony. Talmec watched through his drones as the humans pulled themselves from the wreckage. 23 were injured. Some, badly. 4 were dead, their bodies carefully moved to one side and covered with blankets. Bora had a piece of metal lodged in her leg. Hyun-sik pulled it out, treated the wound, and tied a bandage around it. She tested her weight on the leg, winced, and nodded. Can you run? Captain Mincio asked. If I have to. You will have to. Talmec checked the distance again. 50 kilometers. Through hostile territory. With wounded soldiers. In 4 hours. We run, Captain Mincio said, simply. They ran. Talmec had studied human physiology extensively over the past weeks. Humans were endurance predators on their home world. They could maintain a steady pace for hours, something most species could not do. But 50 kilometers in 4 hours, carrying wounded and equipment? They did it in 3 hours and 40 minutes. Talmec watched them arrive at the colony as the last defensive positions were collapsing. The humans were exhausted, injured, running on determination alone. The smart thing to do would be to find cover, wait for the Vrelian relief force, and survive. They charged straight into the heaviest fighting instead. What followed was the most brutal combat Talmec had ever witnessed. The humans fought at close range, in buildings and streets, where their primitive weapons were just as effective as Korthak's plasma rifles. More effective, sometimes, because humans seemed to have no fear of close combat. Hyun-sik treated wounded colonists while firing his pistol at Korthak's warriors. When he ran out of ammunition, he picked up a fallen enemy weapon and kept fighting. Young Mi lost her radio in the crash. When she needed to call in artillery support, she took a Korthak's communication device. She took it by killing its owner in hand-to-hand combat, then she used it to coordinate the human defense. Taeyang's machine gun overheated and jammed. Without hesitation, he picked up Korthak's weapons. Human weapons. Anything he could find. At one point, Talmec watched him swing a piece of pipe at a raider's head. Bora was shot twice more. She continued fighting, even when Hyun-sik begged her to let him evacuate her to the aid station. Not till everyone else is safe, she said. Sergeant Ji-woo was wounded 3 times. A plasma burn on her arm, a deep cut across her ribs, a broken bone in her hand. She ignored all of it, directing her squad, protecting civilians, refusing to stop. The Vrelian relief force arrived 4 hours after the human insertion. They expected to find the colony destroyed and the human force dead. Instead, they found 4,000 colonists alive and 62 humans still fighting. Only 1 more human had died in the battle itself. Group leader Fel Nar stood in the smoking ruins of the colony, staring at the exhausted humans. How? he asked. How did you do this? Captain Minseo, covered in blood and burns, looked at him with those calm eyes. We did what needed to be done. That night, Talmec sat in his quarters and typed a new report. His manipulators shook as he worked. The words came slowly, carefully. I must revise my previous assessments. Humans do not fight like any known species. They do not calculate acceptable losses. They refuse to accept any losses at all. They will sacrifice themselves to save others, even strangers. This makes them unpredictable and extremely dangerous. I no longer know how to classify their threat level. He paused, then added one final line. I am afraid of what we have discovered. Talmec had stopped pretending this was routine observation. For the first time in his 40-year career, he was personally involved. He needed to understand these humans, not just document them. The hospital ship Mercy's Hand had arrived to treat the wounded from Colony 7. Talmec requested permission to visit, claiming he needed to interview survivors for his report. The real reason was different. He needed to speak with the humans, to ask them why. Why did they fight this way? Why did they take such terrible risks? Why did they refuse to retreat, even when retreat was the logical choice? The medical bay was crowded with wounded humans. Some would recover quickly. Others faced long months of healing. A few would never fight again. Yet the atmosphere was not what Talmec expected. Instead of mourning or anger, he heard laughter. Actual laughter echoed through the corridors. He found Private Taeyong first. The heavy weapons specialist was in a medical pod, being treated for severe burns across his back and arms. The human medical system was primitive but effective, using the body's own healing ability rather than advanced regeneration technology. Talmec approached carefully. Private Taeyong, may I speak with you? The young human opened his eyes. The alien observer, right? Sure. I have got nothing better to do for the next week. I want to understand why you volunteered for the Colony 7 operation. You knew the odds of survival were extremely low. Taeyong was quiet for a moment. Did they tell you about my sister? Your file mentions a sibling. She is a civilian engineer on another colony. When I was 12, raiders hit her colony. Not Korthax, a different group, but the same idea. They came in fast, took what they wanted, killed people who got in their way. My sister hid in a storage container for 6 hours while they destroyed everything around her. Nobody came to help. The colony was too small, too remote. By the time military ships arrived, it was over. Taeyong shifted in his medical pod, wincing at the pain. She survived, but a lot of people did not. And the whole time she was hiding, she kept thinking, why is nobody coming? Where are the soldiers? Where is the help? So you joined the military? Yeah. Because somebody should come. Somebody should help. That is the whole point. Is it not? We are supposed to protect people who cannot protect themselves, even at the cost of your own life? Especially then. What good is a soldier who only fights when it is safe? Talmec did not have an answer to that. He found Bo-Ra next. The scout was missing her right leg below the knee. The doctors had amputated it after the battle. She sat in a wheelchair, reviewing combat footage on a datapad. What are you watching? Talmec asked. The Colony 7 operation. Trying to see what we could have done better. Better? You saved 4,000 lives against impossible odds. Bo-Ra looked up at him with a slight smile. We lost 4 people on the insertion and 1 in the battle. That is 5 people who should still be alive. If I had scouted better, if I had seen the ambush sooner, maybe we do not crash. Maybe those 4 people live. The crash was not your fault. Enemy fire caused it. Maybe. But I keep thinking, what if I had spotted that warship 3 seconds earlier? What if I had called the warning faster? 3 seconds could have mattered. But Talmec studied the young human. She had lost a leg and was already analyzing how to fight more effectively next time. You plan to continue serving? Even after this injury? Of course. They can fit me with a prosthetic. I will be back on duty in 6 months. Maybe less if I push the physical therapy. Most species would retire after such an injury. Most species did not grow up on frontier colonies where everybody pulls their weight. I can still shoot. I can still scout. I can still help. So I will. Hyun-sik was treating patients rather than resting himself. The medic had been awake for 60 consecutive hours, first during the operation, and then treating wounded afterward. He was finally being forced to rest, though he complained about it constantly. They will not let me work, he grumbled when Talmik found him. There are still patients who need care. You need care yourself. You have exhaustion toxins in your system that could cause permanent damage. I am fine. You collapsed twice yesterday. Just tired. That is not the same as unable to help. Talmik sat down beside the medic's bed. Why did you run into that crossfire at Colony 7? 7 times. My sensors counted you, exposing yourself to enemy fire to reach wounded civilians. They were hurt. You could have waited for the fighting to move away from them. They might have died while I waited. Would you wait if someone you could save was dying? I am not a medic. Neither am I, really. I mean, I have got training. But I am just a kid from a mining town who learned first aid. The thing is, when someone is bleeding in front of you, you do not think about the risk. You think about stopping the bleeding. Young Mi was joking with other wounded soldiers when Talmik found her. Her communications equipment had been destroyed, and she had burns on her hands from using captured Korthax devices. She was teaching another soldier some kind of game involving hand gestures and ridiculous words. She noticed Talmik watching and waved him over. Hey, observer. Want to learn poker? I do not think so. May I ask you a question? Sure. When your radio was destroyed, you took a Korthax communication device. The footage shows you fought that raider hand-to-hand for nearly a minute before you won. Why not fall back and get a replacement radio from another human? No time. Artillery needed coordinates right then. If I waited, people would die. But you could have died. Maybe. But I did not. And because I got those coordinates out, the artillery took out that Korthax position, which saved a bunch of civilians in Building 12. Good trade. A good trade? You risked your life for equipment. Youngmi laughed. I risked my life for the people the equipment would save. Big difference. Finally, Talmik found Sergeant Jiwoo. She was sitting alone in a small observation lounge, looking out at the stars. Her arm was in a cast, her ribs were bandaged, and she moved with obvious pain. But her eyes were clear and calm. May I sit? Talmik asked. It is a free ship. They sat in silence for several minutes. Then, Talmik asked the question that had haunted him for weeks. Why do you not value your own survival? We do value it. Your actions suggest otherwise. You take risks no rational soldier should take. Sergeant Jiwoo turned to look at him. You think we are suicidal? On. Axis. On. I think you prioritize the mission over your own lives. No. We prioritize everyone's lives. That is the difference. She gestured at the stars. Out there. Right now. There are people who need help. Some are in danger. Some are dying. Some are just scared and alone. And they are thinking, where is the help? When is someone going to come? And you think you must be that help. Somebody has to be. If not us, then who? But what about you? What about your own life? Your own safety? My life matters because of what I do with it. If I live 100 years hiding from danger, what have I done? But if I spend one day protecting someone who cannot protect themselves, that day meant something. Talmik was quiet, processing this. Finally, he said, your species has only been in space for a short time, yet you fight with a skill and determination I have never seen. Where did you learn this? We have always fought. Look at our history, observer. We have been fighting each other for thousands of years. Wars over land, over resources, over ideas. We got very good at it. We, Canadational C. Honest and today. We got very good at it. That is what concerns me. Your species spent most of its existence killing each other. Yes. And we learned. We learned what war costs. We learned what happens when nobody comes to help. We learned that protection is not about being safe. It is about standing between danger and the people who cannot defend themselves. Talmec accessed the human database through his neural link. He had avoided their history until now, focusing only on their current military capabilities. But Sergeant Ji Woo's words pushed him to look deeper. What he found terrified him. Humans had fought wars that would have destroyed any other species. They had developed weapons that could sterilize entire planets. They had killed hundreds of millions of their own kind. They had nearly driven themselves to extinction multiple times. But they had survived. Not just survived, they had learned from each conflict. Each war had taught them new tactics, new strategies, new ways to fight and win. There was a human saying he found in the database. Hard times create strong men. Humanity had only known hard times. The galaxy had been at peace for 10,000 years. The Vrelian Confederacy had not fought a real war in 8,000 years. Their military forces were ceremonial, their tactics theoretical, their experience minimal. Humans had never stopped fighting. Even now, as they entered the galactic community, they brought with them millennia of combat experience. We are not ready for you, Talmec said quietly. What? What? The galaxy. We are not ready for humanity. We have forgotten how to truly fight. You never did, Sergeant Ji Woo smiled sadly. Then maybe you should hope we remain friends. The Vrelian High Command Council Chamber was designed to inspire awe. The ceiling arched 40 meters overhead, covered in displays showing every Confederacy world. The council members sat in a circle, elevated above the floor, looking down at whoever stood in the center to give testimony. Talmec stood in that center now, feeling very small. 60 council members regarded him with expressions ranging from boredom to mild irritation. He had requested this emergency session 3 days ago. The request had been denied twice before being reluctantly approved. They thought he was wasting their time. They would understand soon enough. Council Leader Vrenthos spoke first. Observer Talmec, you have requested this session to present your final assessment of humanity's military capabilities. We hope this will be more objective than your previous reports, which frankly bordered on panic. Talmec bowed respectfully. Council Leader, honored members, I have spent 2 months observing human military operations. I have witnessed 9 combat engagements. I have interviewed dozens of human soldiers. I have reviewed their historical records. I stand before you today to present my final assessment. He activated his presentation display. Combat footage from his observations began playing on the chamber's screens. The counselors watched with mild interest. I recommend that humanity be classified as a Class 7 threat species. The chamber erupted. Counselors shouted questions. Several stood from their seats. Class 7 was the highest threat classification in Confederacy protocols. It had not been used in 8,000 years. Council Leader Vrenthos raised his hand for silence. Observer, you cannot be serious. Class 7 classification is reserved for species that pose an existential threat to the entire Confederacy. The humans are primitives, with chemical weapons and metal ships. Yes, Talmec said calmly. That is what makes them so dangerous. He expanded the display, showing footage from the first battle he had witnessed. Watch carefully. This is 5 human soldiers attacking 200 Korthax raiders. By every tactical model we use, the humans should have lost. They were outnumbered 40-1. They had inferior weapons and no armor worth mentioning. The footage played. The counselors watched Sergeant Ji Woo's squad charge directly at the enemy. They saw Young Mi calling in artillery while under fire. They saw Hyun Sik running through crossfire zones. They saw Tae Yang singing while he fought. They won Talmec said. Not by retreating and waiting for support. Not by using superior technology. They won by refusing to lose. They have attacked when they should have defended. They advanced when they should have retreated. They took risks that killed them if they were wrong, but won them the battle when they were right. Counselor Marken spoke up. This proves nothing. Luck and recklessness can sometimes overcome poor odds. It does not make them a threat to us. Talmec had expected this. He changed the display. Then watch this. The Colony 7 operation footage began playing. The counselors watched in silence as 63 humans charged into a force of thousands. They saw the crash. They saw the humans run 50 kilometers through hostile territory. They saw the brutal close-quarters battle that followed. 4,000 civilians saved, Talmec said, against a Korthax battle fleet, with 2 transport ships and no heavy weapons. Human casualties: 5 dead, 23 wounded. Korthax casualties: over 800 dead, hundreds more wounded. Impossible, someone whispered. I verified every detail. My observation drones recorded everything. The humans did not use advanced tactics or superior technology. They used determination. They refused to let those civilians die. And because they refused, 4,000 people lived. Counselor Shenva, one of the oldest members, leaned forward. Observer, Talmec, we acknowledge that humans are brave, perhaps even foolishly so. But bravery does not equal threat level. Why do you fear them? Talmec had been waiting for this question. He displayed a new image, a timeline of human history, because they have been doing this for thousands of years. While the Confederacy has been at peace, humans have been at war. Constant war. War against each other, war against their environment, war against everything that threatened them. They have spent their entire existence learning how to fight. He zoomed in on specific conflicts. This was their first world war. 40 million dead. They fought in frozen trenches, in poison gas, in conditions that would kill most of us in hours. They survived. The display shifted. This was their second world war. 80 million dead. They dropped nuclear weapons on their own planet. They fought on every continent, in every environment. They survived. These are just 2 of hundreds of major conflicts. They have fought wars that would have ended our civilization. They call them world wars, and they had multiple. Every conflict taught them. Every battle made them better at violence. Counselor Marken stood. This only proves they are violent among themselves. It does not mean they will threaten us. Does it not? Talmec changed the display again. Let me show you something else I discovered. Humans have rules for warfare. They call them rules of engagement. These rules restrict how they can fight, where they can use certain weapons, how they must treat prisoners, what targets are forbidden. He paused, letting that sink in. Everything I have shown you, every battle where they seemed unstoppable, was fought with restrictions in place. They were holding back. The chamber fell silent. I accessed their historical records. When humans remove those restrictions, when they decide to fight total war, they become something else entirely. They have a concept called scorched earth. They would destroy everything rather than let an enemy have it. They developed weapons that could kill billions. They planned for mutual assured destruction, where both sides would be annihilated but neither would surrender. Talmec's voice grew quieter. We have been at peace for 10,000 years. We have forgotten what real war looks like. Humans remember. They never stopped preparing for it. Council leader Vrenthos spoke carefully. I am suggesting that if humanity ever turns its full military capacity against us, we will lose. Not might lose. Will lose. They are already matching the Korthax despite technological disadvantages. What happens when we give them our technology? What happens when they mount plasma weapons on their ships and learn to build shields? He displayed casualty statistics. In every engagement I observed, humans were outnumbered and outgunned. They won anyway, because they fight differently. They do not calculate acceptable losses. They refuse to accept any losses. Every soldier matters to them. Every civilian matters. They will sacrifice themselves to save others, even strangers. This makes them unpredictable. Our tactical computers cannot model their behavior because they do not follow logical patterns. They follow something else. Something we do not understand. Counselor Shenva asked quietly, "What do you recommend?" Talmec took a deep breath. "I recommend that humanity be offered full Confederacy membership immediately. I recommend we give them access to our technology, our resources, and our support. I recommend we do everything possible to ensure they become our allies rather than our enemies. You want us to reward this aggressive species with membership? I want us to survive. Look at the galaxy around us. The Korthax raiders have terrorized this sector for decades. We send peacekeeping forces that barely contain them. Humans have been here for 2 months and have dealt them more damage than we have in 20 years. There are other threats out there. The Vec Empire on our border. The remnants in the Dark Zone. Dangers we have tried to manage through diplomacy and containment. What happens when those threats see what humans can do? What happens when our enemies realize there is a species that does not back down, does not negotiate, does not accept defeat?" Talmec gestured at the displays. "The question is not whether humanity will dominate this galaxy. The question is whether we want them doing it as our allies or our enemies. I very strongly recommend we choose allies. And if they turn on us anyway?" Marken challenged. "Then we were doomed the moment they left their home world. But I do not think they will. I have spoken with many human soldiers. They have principles. They protect the weak. They keep their word. They value honor and loyalty. If we treat them with respect, if we earn their friendship, I believe they will stand beside us." He paused. "But if we treat them as primitives, if we dismiss them, or try to control them, we will make them into enemies. And that would be the end of us." The council debated for hours. Talmec stood in the center of the chamber, answering questions, showing more footage, providing more analysis. Slowly, he watched the counselors' expressions change from skepticism to concern to something close to fear. Finally, Council Leader Vrenthos called for a vote. All in favor of granting humanity immediate full membership in the Confederacy? 58 hands rose. Only 2 abstained. None voted against. All in favor of classifying humanity as Class 7 threat species? 43 hands rose this time. The others abstained. Again, none voted against. All in favor of establishing full military cooperation with human forces? 60 hands rose. Unanimous. Council Leader Vrenthos looked at Talmec. "Your recommendations are approved. Humanity will be contacted with our offer within the day. Observer Talmec, you are assigned as our liaison to Human Military Command. Try to keep them from terrifying anyone else." Talmec bowed. "I will do my best, Council Leader." That night, in his quarters aboard the Silent Watcher, Talmec made a final entry in his personal log. "I was ordered to observe humans in battle. I was supposed to assess their capabilities and determine if they were ready to join the galactic community. Instead, I discovered that the galactic community is not ready for them. We have grown soft in our peace. We have forgotten what it means to truly fight, truly sacrifice, truly refuse defeat. Humans remember. They have never forgotten. I am returning to Forward Operating Base Stalwart tomorrow to deliver the Council's decision. I hope Colonel Deho and his soldiers understand what an honor this is. I hope they understand that we are offering them membership not because they need us, but because we need them. I hope we have made the right choice." He paused, then added one final line. "I am afraid we have not. But I am more afraid of what would have happened if we had chosen otherwise." On Earth, Colonel Deho received the official communication from the Vrelian Confederacy. Full membership, full technology sharing, full military cooperation. He read it twice, then called his senior officers together. "We are in," he said simply. "Full Confederacy membership. They want us as allies." Captain Minseo smiled her unsettling, calm smile. "Good. Maybe now we can do some real good out here." Sergeant Jiwoo's squad was on leave, recovering from their injuries. When she heard the news, she gathered them together in their barracks. "We are official now," she said. "Part of the big galactic community." Youngmi grinned. "Think they are ready for us?" Taeyong laughed. "Nobody is ever ready for us." Bo-Ra, still in her wheelchair, looked at her squadmates. "Think anything will change?" Sergeant Jiwoo shook her head. "No. We will still be us. Still doing what we do. Just with better equipment and more people to protect." "Good," Hyun-sik said. "I was worried we might have to slow down or something." They laughed together, these 5 humans who had changed the galaxy without meaning to. They did not understand that other species found them terrifying. They were just doing their job, protecting people who needed protection. Somewhere in orbit, Observer Talmech watched them through his drones and whispered a prayer to deities he did not believe in. "Please let them stay our friends."